Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really happy to welcome all of you in this year's second installment of our webinar series. And this month's topic has been designated because of the specificity of the timing. There is an importance of why we're doing it today, and the topic is on your screen, and you've seen it in the announcement. It's about community-based forestry at FAO, from forest trees on people's program to the Social Forestry Team, and it is talking about a 30-year retrospective, and we are having a 30-year young person in front of us here. You will say he is 30 years young, right? As some of you may have heard, he is actually deserting us effectively at the end of tomorrow, we cannot give him that. So we forced him to speak the truth before he leaves for the next chapter in his life. So Dominique Reeb, without much ado, I just want to give the floor to you, and then this is being, as we are doing it, webcast. So people in the remote locations should be hearing us and seeing us, and then I understand. I'm not sure if they will be able to speak up their questions, but they'll certainly be able to send them by text. People connected by Skype. So again, welcome everyone, and the floor is Dominique, is yours. You want me to click, or you?
No, it's okay. I will do it.
Okay, thank you.
So thank you, Andre, and welcome to everybody this afternoon. Very impressed by the number. I don't know if it's about the topic or just to see a future retiree, which is bringing you there. Thanks also to Andre for designating me, as it just said just a couple of days ago, for this session. So obviously, as you can imagine, I didn't have too much time to prepare, but I hope that I can bring back some interesting things to also that we can discuss after the presentation. So what was proposed is that to review a little bit what FAO has been doing the past 30 years. I've not been with FAO 30 years. I'm just going to be 18 years. So it's going beyond my time. So I'm just going to be able to carry on only part of the institutional memory. But I think it's worthwhile to have a look at what FAO has done in that field. So let me see how it works. How do I move the things now? Yeah, I have to go on the. Okay, here. Okay. Okay. Good. So a brief outline. Again, I think it's not a waste of time to basically recall what is community-based forestry. As you will see later on, we have many different understandings and sometimes also wrong perception of what it is. Try to see what FAO has been doing the last 30 years, where we are today, and again, what are the challenges ahead and what can we do to address them. So the definition of community-based forestry, for those who have been working in that field, you have heard that many times, but for the other one, again, it includes the different regimes, so basically different type of tenure arrangement we have, which could be either collaborative, so it means a group of people. It could be a village, it could be user groups, it could be associations, and also including smallholder forestry, like small, basically, forest owners, and so on. Very often we tend to say community forestry, and community forestry basically address only the first type of CBF, the collaborative one. And this actually has been also an issue in the last years. I'll come back to that later on. When we speak about community-based forestry, we want to focus on the formal rights, because these are the rights which are recognized by governments in their legislation. It doesn't mean that informal rights are not important. They're actually extremely important, but the problem again is that it becomes very difficult to assess them. They're also much more fragile because governments can overturn them quite quickly by simple regulations. So in the work we do, we tend normally to focus on the formal right. Good. We are also there, also kind of small distinction. We are not including agroforestry regime. That's for Simone. Again, because of the issue of definition. But certainly that's something which is extremely important. Actually, Simone is working on that issue also. So going back a little bit in the past, just to recall, basically the first really important movement was basically generated by the 8th World Forestry Congress, which took place in Jakarta, Indonesia in 1978, which declared that the world's forests must be maintained on a sustainable basis for the use and enjoyment of all. This was the very first time that globally there was a strong requirement for countries to put the people at the center. Forestry, as you all know very well, has been very much, tree-centered, and since 1978, people understood that without people, we won't basically achieve anything. So this has been really the big kickoff, basically big start of the community-based, at that time, community forestry movement, I would say. Right after that, the Forest and Trees and People program, which was a multi-donor funded project, played a considerable role, I think, in promoting these ideas. So the project itself, you will see it's a total volume of about 40 million over the years, had 3 main phases. You see the dates here, starting in 1987, and basically phased out in 2002. The main objective of this program was to strengthen human and institutional capacities, government, NGOs, and basically all the different actors around community forestry, to develop the tools, participatory tools, and also to act as basically a dissemination mechanism platform of community forestry. Okay, here is a long list, so I will not go through all of that. But basically the main outputs, again, I think what we can say is that the whole community forestry, I will call movement, has been very much fueled by this program, by the FTPP. It was really worldwide. It was in all the 3 main regions, so Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Had a huge number of participants. Again, quite substantial, of course, financial support, which helped to develop capacities. So to try just to name a few, all the approaches on rapid rural appraisal and participatory approaches have been developed, all the tools, and some of you know of them. The work on conflict management, already at that time, guidelines on land use planning allocation, also working with Farmers Field School, all trainings and facilitation techniques, also working on terms of networking, publication, and so on. So a huge number of outputs have been produced. Oops. All right. So the evaluation report concluded basically that the program itself has been extremely instrumental and was the best known community forestry development program of its kind in the world, and I think there is no doubt about that. It has, as I said before, it had a network of 12,000 members, and has also contributed to the visibility and reputation of the forestry department. That's something we probably have forgotten today, but this has been really a very visible program and really put forward the forestry department. It's true that if we look at the development of the forest sectors, I mean, it has been at the forefront of this major shift, again, moving from a tree-centered or focused approach to a more inclusive approach. And that's absolutely fundamental. And we're still, of course, today working on this change. It has been also at the origin of many of the methodologies, tools which have been developed. It was extremely informative. I think most people were relying on the literature which was produced by the FTPP. The community forestry unit, which was basically implementing this program, has produced about 80 publications. Most of them are still available here. And again, trying to lead the way in transforming the relationship between users or local managers and the forestry administration. It was really from moving from extension approaches to a more participatory approach. In the past, we had extension, basically the extension services of the forestry department were going to, tell people what to do. And since then, I mean, this has changed, and now people were put into the driving seat much more. So overall, quite a positive assessment. I mean, basically evaluation of the whole program, and there are a few, of course, issues. Nobody is perfect of what could have been done better. And I think it's very important because actually today we're still somehow a bit struggling with the same issues. The program itself has not been so well integrated in the forestry department overall activities. It has been working a little bit in isolation, and that's a little bit the drawback of successful programs. And I'm also thinking about the current successful program because we have the same issues. That because you are well funded and you have a good, good staff, you tend to work in your bubble, and everything is fine in this bubble because everything is fine. You have the staff, you have the expertise, and you have the funds. But the result of that is that you get disconnected from the work of the others. And this creates also even sometimes some, let's say, jealousy and also counterproductive type of attitude. So that's something from which the CFU itself, the unit which was implementing that program, suffered. Actually, after the phasing out, we'll see that, of the program, the CFU was abolished. Boom, was gone. And this is a little bit the result of this these issues. More attention should have been paid to achieve, institutional strengthening, and that's basically also related to the last one. Would have needed a better relationship with officials, forestry institution. What happened there again? The program itself worked a lot with NGOs, with local institutions, and quite often bypassed government officials because they were the tough guys, because they're the guys who say, well, we're not so interested to hand over the resources. So as a matter of easiness, you tend to work with the one with whom you can work. But at the end of the day, government is making policies, not NGOs, not local groups, unfortunately, in that case. So if you don't work with the government, all the good work you've achieved will just disappear very quickly. And that's something, again, we still see today very often, that the tendency is to take the easy way to basically implement program and project. But by doing so, we undermine the sustainability of the work. So this is why I thought it was interesting to go back to this, I think, major program, and it's still a major program, even in compared to today's terms. So what has been achieved and what could have been done better? And again, these are lessons learned, I think, for not only for, of course, community-based forestry, but for the ongoing program of the Forestry Department and FAO in general. Now, after the time of the FTPP, so that basically I've put the time between 2002, which was the phasing out of the FTPP, and 2014, which was the establishment of the Social Forestry Team. We had, of course, the Forestry Department continued to be quite active in that field. But again, one of the first results of the ending of the FTPP was the abolition of the community forestry unit. I think the reason was that it has been seen again as being too autonomous, and this was not basically something which was desired. But the problem of that, of course, by removing the CFU, which was very well known outside, FAO lost a lot of visibility in that field. So again, these things has been done, but I think this is where we can learn also some lesson there that this was probably not necessarily a very wise decision. During these years, I mean, there are several also interesting programs going on. One of them I would like to mention is the strengthening participatory approaches to forest management in 3 countries, Ghana, Guyana, and Uganda, which was a very innovative project trying to build capacities of this forestry administration. These countries have community-based forestry programs in their forestry department, but the aim was really to strengthen capacities. And we also knew by experience that the traditional way of capacity development is not very effective. When you deliver, one-time workshop, okay, people are there, they get a certificate, and next time they forget mostly what they've done. So this approach was really much more a process. And actually, everything about community-based forestry is about process. So the process of this capacity development was to train individuals and then to have a coaching basically sequence, so that you could follow up with the trainees and look basically working with them to implement what has been learned and then improve, step after step. And this has been proven to be very effective. So this is a way to really leave some real capacity on the ground. Again, it's more time-consuming, slightly more expensive eventually, but it's far more effective than the normal one. And we had a similar one also in African Francophone countries, in Benin, Mali, and Niger, and doing the same work with this coaching system, mentoring system, which was very, very effective. And that's something I will suggest to retain also for current projects. The also important work which was done during this period was the work also on forest tenure. Interestingly enough, tenure, everybody today knows that tenure is important, but again, I can tell you in 2002, nobody was speaking about forest tenure. It was completely, nobody had any clue about forest tenure. And it's only through basically the work we did in the community forestry unit and then later on in the department on tenure that we were able to raise awareness about the importance of tenure. Obviously, working on community-based forestry, you very quickly, hit the wall basically, and the wall is basically tenure. When you don't have tenure rights, it's very difficult to do any kind of investment. It's very difficult for the communities or for the smallholders to do any kind of investment, long-term work on their forest resources. So we conducted there quite a series of regional surveys, studies, case studies in Asia, Africa, Latin America, also in Europe, Central Asia, which really provided a very significant amount of knowledge on this tenure issue. And of course, this is still continuing today. This also contributed a lot to the work which has been done by the BGGT. Actually, the department was a main partner to the development of the voluntary guidelines for governance of tenure. And this is one of the, I think, again, important development of this period, I would say. Another also interesting development during that period was the International Conference on Forest for Food Security and Nutrition. This was, again, something completely new. No forestry person had ever addressed this issue. I mean, again, because forest is for trees and wood and non-wood forest product, but nobody put it in so close relationship with food security and nutrition. And I think, and especially I've experienced that last year, it's extremely important because it really helped to bridge, to reach out, and to show the importance of forest to the, basically, society in general. And I'll come back to that also a bit later. And then, of course, we had also a lot of activities with the National Forest Program Facility, as you know, which was working in a number of countries. And we contributed there also by providing support to support basically policies and also, of course, national forest programs in integrating community-based forestry in this national program. So this National Forestry Program Facility has been also quite instrumental for us to reach out. Okay, and then basically the contemporary period now. So it's basically from 2014 to date. The department decided to reestablish a social forestry team. which is for me a little bit the rebirth, if you want, of the community forestry unit, and which is covering all these areas here. So the, basically community-based forestry, forest tenure, food security, nutrition, small-scale forest enterprise. We just got a new position now on forest producers organization, going to work very closely with the FFF, Forest and Farm Facility. We are working on indigenous people, on forestry education and youth, and gender. And then I said here the dream team, because it's true. I mean, now if we look back in terms of the field we're covering, we are really covering all the essential, I would say, issues and themes that we need to work with to make sure that, to ensure that basically we can provide the necessary support to countries to develop and promote their community-based forestry system. So that's, I think, a positive development, and basically we are, in terms of human capacity, we are fine. Okay, now to go back a little bit, I mean, this has been what FAO has been doing the last 30 years, and you can see, you've seen the development. We can come back later on with questions. But globally, now, where are we in terms of community-based forestry? As some of you might have read already, we published now a year ago, or a couple of years ago, a review of the last 40 years of community-based forestry, which provides, I think, a quite exhaustive report on where we are. And then, okay, this is based on the different reviews that we have been conducting. So what we can say that today it's about that 1/3 of the world forests are under some kind of CBF regime. So this is quite significant. So this is actually, if you think from 1978, which was the first kickoff, and today, and then you know about 1/3 of the world forest, you can say, well done, not bad. But okay, so some reflection about all what happened lately. One thing I think which is interesting to see also, like in the past, of course, the early years, we were very much working on project base, like I've said before, in terms of the assessing the FTPP, looking at basically pilots, projects, and pilots, whatever case studies. And this very quickly we saw that this doesn't lead to any kind of sustainability. And so we have moved from this kind of project approach to a much more holistic one, addressing governance and policy issues, because obviously CBF, it's a very policy issue. But now, let's say the observation from the last year, I think what we have seen, despite of this achievement, is that we have lost visibility. While in the past, community forestry was very, very prominent. If you look today, just look at the agenda of COFO or whatever, other like, let's say, high events in the forestry. This social forestry, community-based forestry is basically not to be seen, not to be clearly seen. You can see it's underlying maybe, but it's not very visible. What we have seen also, which is for me a bit striking, a little bit also worrying, is that the capacities, and knowledge and expertise is kind of disappearing. Like me, I'm going to retire, and okay, it's not so many, coming after me, and that's a little bit, a bit worrying. And we'll try our best, but certainly we haven't done a good job there. Participatory approaches, same thing. I think most of the staff, I know I've been at some time, like in the, I would say 90s or whatever, train on participatory approaches, different skills, which helps you to interact much better with your group of stakeholders. This is also disappearing. I mean, I've not heard about any of this training anymore. And the same thing, if you look for consultants, if you look, then it really scratch your head to find somebody who had the skills, has practiced it also. But one thing is to have the skill, the other thing is to have experience, basically field experience. And honestly, it's really getting difficult to find this type of persons around. And I think this is where I think was one of the mistakes, probably also a failure, maybe, or whatever of all the work we did in the past, is that we were doing always on-the-job training. So on-the-job training is nice, but it's very expensive. And then when again the the trained people directly disappear for whatever reason, it's gone. We never managed to really bring into forestry curricula these participatory approaches, community-based forestry, with a very few exceptions. Maybe Nepal and maybe Wageningen in Holland, and then I mean it's very, very few. And that's actually quite surprising, knowing that I think it's absolutely key factor of success for whatever we do in forestry. Let's say the academia hasn't really, basically got it, and then probably also we as an organization didn't do well enough to work with academic institutions with forestry education to ensure that new generation will also be trained. And actually, that was one of the problems also within the forestry department, is that the forestry education post has been has been cancelled, it was in 2007, I think, sometime like this. And I think it's a mistake, because if we really want to have the forestry expert to be, on top of things, they need to be properly trained. But if we don't influence, forestry training, then again, we keep, training people like we used to train them 30 years ago, and that's not going to work. It's not working, basically. So again, there are always exceptions, but I think in general, I think this is probably one major problem we have, and that's maybe something we really need to look at. As I said, also, the community-based forestry has been overshadowed by more attractive initiatives. All the funding, of course, moved. It's like this. It's no way. It's normal. This is we cannot condemn it. But donors tend to move with the trends. And lately we had the Red Plus trend. So I mean, all the money went there, with GCF and so on. And that, of course, basically kind of draining the funds away from this type of initiatives. Although these basically programs do include community-based forestry, because they know that again they cannot succeed if you don't include people, but it's not done, I think, in a way that really ensures this really to work in an efficient manner. So there is a thing there probably we need to work on, so that to make sure that this new initiative do integrate in a meaningful way, I think, these approaches. Well, all of that basically led to some kind of doubt on effectiveness of community-based forestry management. Of course, you will still meet a lot of people who say, well, we've been talking about this for the last 40 years. Well, we still have, high deforestation rate, well, it doesn't work really well, and it's complicated, and of course, people get tired about this and move away. So why is it like so? And one fundamental reason why we basically, people get a bit discouraged or basically are losing hope a bit of this approach, is that there's not just one type of community-based forest management. People, I mean, again, especially the one not working in the field, have a kind of, I would say, it's simplistic, understanding. Is that, well, it's community forestry, it's communities working in the forest, and that's it. Well, it's not like this. You have a wide, range of different approaches of a community-based forestry regime. It goes from, as you see on this diagram, from a very passive one, where basically people are told what to do, up to the other extreme, where people are owning the resources and decide what to do. So in between, you have many, many different regimes. And the problem there is that this is not known, and most of the regime which are existing today, the 1/3 of the world forest, I'm talking before, most of this regime are in the left part of this spectrum. So it means people have some right, but only some right, and sometimes some very weak right. But it is sold as being community-based forestry. And that's a big problem, because of course this doesn't work, because if you had only part of the right, or very short-term right, you're not interested. What the heck, why should I do a long-term investment on a piece of forest where I just have like right of harvesting fruits, berries, and maybe just for the next 2 years? So what's the point? You don't do that. I mean, yourself, if you'll be in their position, you will do exactly the same. You will go there, rip, what can be harvested, and go away with it. That's normal. So that's again the big problem we have, is that this misunderstanding of the approach and the very wide variety of rights you have in this approach. And this is why within now the Social Forestry Team, we developed some tools to try to make the distinction between these different regimes. So, and that's something which is going on now quite fine, quite well. And it helps countries also to assess where they stand. And then it helps us also to know, and also in terms of impact assessment, to assess what type of regime works best. And that's something which needs to continue, because it's fundamental that people understand, well, it's not just one time. Okay, so that I just said, and also people also tend to misuse this. This is why they say, okay, we consulted them, or we give them small right, and therefore, it's people-centered. No, it's not like this. And then, of course, there is the obvious reason of the highly political nature of community-based forestry. Because what does it mean? It means for the governments to hand over resources to communities or to smallholders, but this is a question of power and a question, of course, of tenure. And many governments are quite reluctant to do that. They are reluctant either because they don't trust communities, which is, we can understand. And they say, oh, well, if we give them the tenure rights, they will just, first of all, they will go and clear cut the same. That's a very common perception. Or they are just vested interests. People are making business with it, and they don't want to basically, have others doing business with the same thing. So it's a highly political issue, and this is where it requires a lot of work from the actors there. Also, donors and other actors are also reluctant sometimes to embark on this or to recognize the importance of these rights, because they know it's very complex. And they don't want to delay their programs, they don't want to delay their funding, they don't want to even face a kind of objection from the partners. So all of that makes that basically CBF in general has quite some hurdle to go through. But one thing we can say after all these 40 years is that we know pretty well, and I think very well actually, what do we need to make the community-based forestry working. Through all the studies we have done and the knowledge which has been now accumulated worldwide, in all the regions of the world, we know that what we have clustered in 6 keys. Of course, others can classify that in whatever number of keys, but it's not so important. What's important is to know that there are, the 6 different clusters which are fundamental to basically get to a successful, sustainable community-based forestry. And so the first one is about, it's very small here, well, security of tenure, and then the other one is the, tenure, okay, I was just speaking about, I think it's quite pretty obvious, and then the second one is about the legal framework. Again, without legal framework, you cannot have any kind of long-term investment. Then, you have the capacity development, governance, the technology also, and then the access to markets, and finally also to have a supportive bureaucracy. Supportive bureaucracy, it's not, bureaucracy, basically you need to have the forestry institution to be supportive. And what's also important also is that, you need all the 6 keys. It doesn't work if you have only 3 keys. And that, again, something that often programs and projects, they only focus on 1 or 2 of these keys and expect the whole thing to work. It won't work. You need the 6 keys. There is no way around. And this we have seen and seen again everywhere. Unless you use 6 keys, you won't work. It won't work. So, point for consideration. We are not in COFO, but I will still mention point for consideration here. Well, first of all, that's it's not because I'm working there, but I think this is, again, it's just a fact. It doesn't work without community-based forestry. And again, community-based forestry, again, it can be group, villages, individual. It doesn't work. If you don't put the people at the center of your work, it won't work. You can try whatever you want. You can try with armed force or whatever. It will work for some time, but it won't work on the long term. So there is no way around. There is no alternative. And this is the only way to address major challenges, the one on climate change or the SDGs and sustainable forest management. If we, if we look at when we had the conference a couple of weeks ago on the halting deforestation, when you see the scope, the dimension of the problem of the issue is huge. So it's not with money necessarily we'll achieve anything. So GCF funds honestly won't make any change there. It will make change only if people are involved and then can benefit from this funding eventually to develop their capacity. Large-scale impacts on forestry and also on livelihood will only be achieved if people are empowered to do so. If you deprive people to do so, there is no way it will work. I'm always seeing also using the parallel between agriculture and forestry. I mean, nobody is questioning why a farmer should own a piece of land. I mean, they are owning it, you know, and every year they harvest their stuff and they know they can invest and they can develop their farmland. Why on earth can they not do the same with a piece of forest? You know, I mean, there is no reason. But still, they are deprived from doing it. So that's the problem we have. Okay. Now, I think in terms of positive things, I think what has been done recently, especially through the CFS Committee on Food Security and the adoption of the VGGT, I think is a fundamental, I think, step and positive step because. And I've experienced already myself personally and my colleagues also, it's really a very good entry point to address sensitive issues. In the past, if you will go to a country and say, okay, let's talk about forest tenure, well, we'll close the door, finish. No, it's not your business, just go out. There we can say, well, look, your country has endorsed this VGGT because all countries of a member of CFS have endorsed it, and that's most countries in the world. Which says, okay, they are principled, they're voluntary, but they are principled. And say, okay, why not assessing your tenure system and your forest management system against these guidelines? And it works. And people, I mean, all the country we have done the assessment, there was never kind of a rejection. They say, yeah, okay, why not? Let's do it. And so you basically address this issue in a kind of neutral environment, and basically again, governments are ready to discuss and review these things, and it really helps to start establishing a relation with the government and also with the NGOs, local communities, and so on. So it's very, very effective. Again, it's a process which needs to be well done. The issue, this is why I was saying it's so important to link forest to food security and nutrition, because when we speak about integrated landscape management, and I think that's, anyway, I think we all probably share the same opinion. That's really the way to go because we cannot deal with these sectors separately. When we know the importance, and when others especially know the importance of forests in terms of contribution to food security and nutrition, they will be much more inclined to listen to what foresters also have to say and what communities want to do. The producer organization, I think this is what FFF is doing, and I'm doing some publicity there for them, but because I think it's very important because we need to reach out. Again, the sheer number of people to reach out is impossible for a government or for an associated organization to achieve. It's impossible. The only way is to work through organizations who themselves are already organized and can reach out with their own means. So this is a very positive, I think, instrument that needs to be supported, and I hope that the support will be provided. And then we have to continue the work that we are currently doing in terms of assessing the effectiveness of community-based forestry. We need to be honest about what it can achieve and why it achieves or why it doesn't achieve. And again, of course, to continue the work which was in the past very well done by the FTPP in terms of sharing information and knowledge among all the different interested groups. And maybe one thing to conclude also, what I would like to say, the difficulty, the complexity of community-based forestry is that it's not a technique, it's a process. And it should be a quality process. And this is where most of, I will say, of us very often fail because we don't do it as a process. We do it, as an activity-driven. It's not activity-driven. It should be a process. You really need to build trust, confidence, knowledge, and then this is how you can move on. But this is not only specific to community-based forestry. There are many issues which are of that nature, which are the same. It's like democracy or whatever. It's not something you get because you read a note. No, it's something you need to experience. It's something you need to nurture, let's say. So it's a process, and we have to be conscious of that. It means process means time. It's not something you can do over 6 months. It will take a few years. But still, what I've seen, because we know what to do, that we can move faster than we could in the past. When we were first piloting community forestry in Gambia, for example, it took us a few years. And I did the same in Mongolia. Within 3 years, we achieved what we had achieved in 10 years in another country. So just to say, but still, it requires time and proper understanding. Voila, so I think that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Dominique. Yeah. So we have, according to the announcement, until 2 o'clock, right? So we have some good space and time for actually a discussion. Let me, Roberto, can you maybe check if, our colleagues who are connected by remote, you should feel free to start, typing your questions if you have any at this point or later on by texting it in the Skype text field, and we'll pick those questions and we'll also pass them on to Dominique. So let me maybe just start by making a short comment. I'm still relatively new in FAO, just over a year, so no more excuse, but still, I remember very well when I came, I was sort of really puzzled by our famous organigram of the department, where we have, these 4 clusters of teams, and somehow at the very bottom is the forest resource management, which is really kind of at the heart and at the core of what we do. And then, almost like a footnote, after you go through the entire list, there's another footnote, and that's the social forestry. Whereas, of course, FRM, social forestry, and forest economics, they're really what makes the whole total of forestry. Physical interventions, making sure you have resources, the money, and incentives, and people in the center of it. So in that sense, social forestry is really, the heart. Well, yeah, probably you can say it's the heart, because the economics will be the brain, and the resource management will be, I don't know, the muscle. I'm sorry. I'm improvising. Sorry, Sheila. No offense meant, but of course the heart and the brain is required everywhere. But it's a little bit of a superficial metaphor. In any case, so it's at the center of what we do, and of course, you having been connected and really central to this cause for all those years, and you offering us this very wonderful kind of retrospection and which allows us to also look forward. I would maybe challenge you to share with us your view as to where, because, okay, social forestry, yes, it's at the center, at the heart of what we do, but FAO is certainly not unique as an organization dealing with those matters. Of course, many countries are fully kind of engaged in that, starting from some poster child cases like Nepal and others, and there are many organizations who do the same. So maybe if you could, share with us and help us understand where you see, with your depth of experience and the breadth of experience, what is the FAO thing that we are so, maybe not uniquely, but most strongly positioned to contribute to this broader, very broad and competitive situation, mutually complementary field. So I want to throw this in, but then you start coming up with your questions, including people connected by remote.
No, I think obviously FAO, like it has always been, I think is our comparative advantage is that we are our member country. We are the only organization, I think, forestry organization, which have access to this political level. We are dealing with the forestry administration. No other organization has this advantage. So whatever we develop, we discuss, we debate, again, go for forestry commissions. This is where we can really reach out and influence also and provide support for policy development. When we have projects, again, the projects we implement, we're already going through government. And I think that's definitely the comparative advantage that we have that I think nobody else has, at least for forestry. So that's it.
Okay, I don't know how we're going to do it. Do we need to have a mic? Yes, Luigi, if you could help. There are hands there on that side. And
Dominique, thank you very much for your presentation. Serena, I think we all know each other. Before wishing you good luck for the new life, I just wanted to have some tips from you. I think, as you mentioned before, donors move with trends and also to initiatives and organizations. But I think something that goes beyond the trend is actually the code that has been put now to try to scale up from all the good initiatives that have been in the last 30 years, as you mentioned, and the good practices and successes of community-based forestry. Try to scale up a bit more to have more impact on moving beyond really just local successes to something that could be even more influential. So maybe retrospectively from your 30 years of experience, some suggestions for the one of us who would like to follow your step and try to see how to scale up a bit the successes until now. Thanks.
Do you want to take one by one, or yeah, let's try one by one. Yeah, if that's okay. Yeah. No, I mean, scaling up, I mean, obviously, I think the same thing. We have this kind of bit impatience also from donors and so on to see things, moving. The problem with scaling up, I mean, we all want scaling up for sure. The problem is for scaling up, especially community-based forestry, you cannot scale up unless the policy, legal environment is enabling. And this is where, I mean, where we basically, we don't find this requirement very often. There are some countries which are managing very well, but many others, don't provide this environment. So we need to work first also on this environment to make it enabling, and then basically scale up. And this is where I see a little bit of, I'm actually a bit concerned actually with the kind of GCF funding, which brings big funding for forestry, for example, but without having the required enabling environment. And it might actually lead to the opposite of what is desired, because if you flood, with especially forestry administration, which have very low absorption capacity with funding, it's going to be a deterrent for them to improve policies and legislation because they have the money. So what's the point? So this is where, but again, it's not. Yeah, it's tricky. So it's not easy. And this is where I think, again, being a process, we need to engage with government, and then, based on some very clear roadmap, I think this is what RED also is trying to do, is first to set up the enabling condition, and then basically try to scale up. But it goes beyond just having kind of formal type of piece of legislation or whatever. It really needs to be well integrated and put in place.
Okay. Let me take a question. We have a question from our remote participants. There is a question from Peter Van Lierop from Panama. Why still a unit dealing with community-based forest management if we look to integrate it in broader community-based landscape management? So maybe a question and a little bit of a conversation with some landscape groups. And thanks, Peter, for the question.
Yes, thanks, Peter. We cannot hear you, I don't know, yeah. Okay, no, I mean, I think it's still well justified. I mean, certainly, and I think we are showing it already. I mean, this integration is needed, is required, but you still need to retain proper understanding of what community-based forestry is. Already, I mean, as I said before, within the forestry world, people still do not have, I think, a clear understanding of what it is. So if we start, integrating it completely with others, we might lose completely the knowledge base and the expertise. But definitively, and I think this is what we are doing now with the food security and nutrition, we are more and more advocating for this integration. But we still need to keep it. I mean, it's like agriculture or whatever. So if you have, I mean, of course, institutionally, you could have kind of a unit, if you want, or a department which could be integrated landscape management, and then you put all this field of expertise together. That's institutional. That could be also a possibility, certainly. But you still need to retain within that the expertise on community-based forestry.
Thanks. Again, thanks, Peter, and I encourage other remotely connected colleagues to think of questions and use the opportunity to ask Dominique. And of course, at the end, this whole process of integration may be projected into having a food and landscape organization. Okay, we had Dawei, Dawei, Nora, Peter,
Yes, thank you, Dominique. I appreciate your perspective and lots of insight. My question is, this community forestry, this tenure stuff, under the governance, under the forest concession that Thais group is working at, I see the same thing. We had a public conversation on this. I mean, it's property rights issue. How do you see that, I guess, your perspective, how do we work across different teams? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dominique. I have to stand up. So thank you very much, Dominique, for your excellent presentation. That's really very nice and very interesting. And I think what you said regarding the silos, if we want really to make sure that this work, this excellent work that you are doing with your team is really mainstreamed with all our work in FAO forestry and beyond, we need first to integrate it in our work. And the best way to do it, I see two things. These are really comment and maybe a question for us also to take home. One is, or to take to our desks. One is regarding the resource mobilization, which is really a very good opportunity to make sure to break the silos. And you mentioned GCF, that is shadowing the community-based forestry. And also there is the JEP 7 that is coming. I think the best way to do it is really to make sure that with all in the preparatory phases of project proposals development, we will need to use, for the forestry related work, we need projects, we need to use the CBF effectiveness assessment as to feed the baseline and then to steer the right answers for adaptation and mitigation involved in the communities, because it's really very important, I think. The second point is also to integrate it within how to deal with it within FAO strategy, FAO forestry strategy, and it is timely, I think, that the process is launched, and it's important to see how this can be integrated. And yeah, that's it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you, Dominique, for this excellent presentation. Looking back, and I almost asked the questions the question that I had in mind, but finally he ended up somewhere differently. So I present mine as well. That at some point, yeah. First, I very much appreciate that you use the points for considerations ahead of your presentation, and the second is that there, and also earlier, you said that the community-based forest management is pretty much a solution, and there's no other way forward. And that reminds me, I don't know how many of you got the message from Christian Küchli, who is retiring at the same time as Dominique from Switzerland,